Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to unpack really fascinating stage of early childhood, the development of 3-year-olds.
A very dynamic time.
Yeah, we've got some great insights here, pulls from a document called 3yearsold.pdf.
Yes.
And our goal really is to kind of get to the core of what makes this period, say, 36 to 48 months so important.
Right.
Think of it as, a way to understand those amazing, sometimes kind of head-scratching behaviors you might be seeing.
Absolutely. Behavior is often driven by these big emotional shifts, their first real tries at social stuff, and just a flood of questions.
Oh, the questions. Yeah, it's definitely a period of emotional breakthroughs, trying to figure out social rules, and like you said, surprisingly deep questions sometimes.
It really is an incredible transformation. What's so interesting is how all these different parts, their thinking, feelings, physical skills, they're all moving forward almost, together.
Okay, let's jump right in then.
Mhm.
One of the most striking things our source points out is just the sheer explosion in language.
Oh, definitely.
We're talking a jump from maybe 500 words to, well, potentially over 1,500.
Yeah, it's a massive leap.
They go from just naming things to, actual conversations, even trying to tell little stories.
And the storytelling really starts to take shape.
And, of course, the constant stream of why, how, and what if. It's like they're building their understanding of the world, one question at a time.
Exactly. They're trying to make sense of everything. Plus, you start seeing that early humor emerge, too, which is a whole other level of communication.
Right. Little jokes.
Yeah. And that huge language growth, it's not happening on its own, right? It's deeply tied to how their thinking is developing.
How so?
Well, they start grasping categories like understanding a dog and a cat are both animals, for instance.
Okay. Sorting things out.
Yeah, rules become clearer. They can compare sizes, start putting events in order, like first this, then that, and even get early counting and those tricky time concepts like yesterday and tomorrow.
Wow. So it's like they're getting the mental tools to structure everything they experience.
Pretty much. A whole toolkit.
And then there's the emotional side, which just seems to get so much richer, doesn't it?
Definitely.
They can suddenly put names to more complex feelings, like nervous or maybe embarrassed.
Yes, labeling those nuanced emotions is a big step.
And our source mentions the start of perspective taking that's huge, realizing someone else might feel differently.
That's a fundamental shift. Understanding that others have their own inner world, their own thoughts and feelings, it's key for social and emotional growth.
And you see early signs of empathy, right?
Yeah.
Even if, handling their own big feelings is still a work in progress.
Oh, for sure. The self-regulation takes time, but that growing understanding of others, it feeds directly into their imaginative play.
Ah, okay. How does that work?
Well, the document talks about them developing full narrative play, so actual characters, plots, maybe some magic or fantasy.
Right, like setting up whole scenarios.
Exactly, and sometimes they even make up rules for these imaginary games. It's not just copy anymore, there's real intention and a storyline.
It's like they're practicing social situations in a safe space almost,
That's a great way to put it.
which naturally leads to their social world getting bigger, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They start initiating play more.
They become the instigators.
They start navigating the tricky business of taking turns, sometimes successfully, sometimes not so much.
Yes. Turn-taking is a big lesson.
And they become way more aware of the social stuff happening around them. You see the start of friendships, even though those friendships can be, let's say, flexible.
Very flexible sometimes.
Right.
But what's really cool is seeing how it all connects. The document highlights how they get a clearer grasp of cause and effect. Push this, that happens.
Right. Simple logic.
They use their growing vocabulary to ask for what they need more directly. And they start feeling like they belong, like they're part of a group, which is so important.
Now, this idea really jumped out at me from the source. The storm before the settle.
Yes. That resonates with many parents, I think.
The idea that those really intense emotional moments, the meltdowns, the arguments that seem totally irrational, often come right before a big leap forward in their thinking or language or social skills.
That's so true.
We've all seen it, right? But yesterday we did it this way,
Yeah.
or the classic bedtime drama. I'm not tired, I just don't want to close my eyes forever.
Oh, I've heard variations of that one. Or the social sensitivity. She laughed at me. Everything feels so big.
Exactly.
And it's really helpful, I think, to reframe what looks like regression. When they seem to slide backward in skills as brain reorganization or maybe recalibrating.
Okay, so it's not really going backward.
Not necessarily. It often means their brains are busy making significant new connections, integrating all this new information. That apparent chaos is often a sign of growth.
That's a really useful perspective.
Oh.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. What about their physical development? Gross motor skills seem to really take off.
They really do. They're climbing much better. Learning to pedal a tricycle, that's a big one.
Coordination, yeah.
Walking backward confidently, getting better at throwing and catching, and you might even see the start of skipping or hopping. They're just becoming so much more capable physically.
And fine motor skills, too.
Absolutely. Also getting much more refined, using kid-safe scissors, trying to draw simple shapes or stick figures.
You may be starting to trace letters?
Yeah, potentially starting that. Stacking smaller blocks with more control, threading beads. You really see that hand dexterity improving.
It's amazing to watch. So when we look at this whole stage, what are the really fundamental shifts in how they interact with the world? And what things still need to stay consistent from earlier?
Well, a key shift the document points out is in how they use language. It moves beyond just functional stuff, asking for juice or saying all done. It becomes much more expressive. They start narrating their feelings, telling little stories, and interestingly, using language to kind of test social boundaries.
Ah, okay. Pushing limits with words.
A little bit, yeah. Seeing what reactions they get.
That makes sense. And like we said, that pretend play gets way more involved, right? Actual role switching, inventing whole worlds.
Exactly. It's not just mimicking anymore. There's real creativity, real narrative going on, sometimes even group pretend play.
And emotionally. They're getting better, but still need support.
Very much so. Emotional regulation is improving, but it's definitely a supported skill. They can still get easily overwhelmed, especially by too much happening or just being tired.
Leading to those meltdowns we talked about.
Right. And that natural curiosity, it just ramps up. Prepare for even more why and what if questions. It doesn't really slow down.
So what stays the same? What do they still really need?
Structure and routine remain absolutely crucial. Predictability helps them feel secure.
Knowing what's coming next.
Exactly. Consistent routines, repeating favorite stories or songs, clear and consistent boundaries, both physical, like not hitting, and social rules that all provides an anchor for them.
And help with emotions.
Definitely. They still heavily rely on us, the adults, to help them understand and manage those big feelings, especially, when they're tired or hungry or just overwhelmed by everything. Basic needs are still key.
Okay. So for listeners maybe tracking their own 3-year-old's journey, what are some key milestones the document suggests we generally see by the end of this age, around 48 months?
Yeah, the document gives a good checklist, kind of. Look for things like speaking in full sentences, telling simple stories.
The narrative stuff again.
Right. Asking and answering those why and how questions. Engaging in brief turn-taking, following simple group rules.
Short periods of cooperative play.
Yeah, short bursts. Knowing their name and age. Maybe recognizing some letters or numbers, showing empathy sometimes.
Okay.
Mostly independent with toileting, washing hands, helping get dressed, and using words for past and future like yesterday or we will go tomorrow. These are good general signs.
But what if some of those things aren't quite there? What are some potential red flags the document mentions around 48 months that might warrant a closer look?
This is really important. Things to pay attention to would be not speaking in sentences or using pronouns like me or you correctly.
Okay.
Rarely making eye contact or showing very little interest in other kids. A real lack of imaginative or pretend play. Difficulty following simple 2- or 3-step instructions. A very limited vocabulary or speech that's consistently hard for even familiar people to understand. Also, not really responding to questions or engaging in that back and forth of conversation, and maybe a lack of affection or clear attachment to their main caregivers.
And the document stresses checking in with professionals, right? Early screening.
Absolutely. Tools like the ASQ or MChat can be helpful starting points, but definitely talk to your pediatrician or look into early intervention services if you have any concerns at all. Early support can make a huge difference.
Good advice. Now, something many caregivers probably experience is, well, the return of hitting, biting, or pushing. Just when you thought that phase was over.
Oh, yes, the reappearance.
Why might these behaviors pop back up around age 3?
The document suggests a few reasons. It could be a reaction to new situations, like starting preschool or more complex playdates, feeling overwhelmed.
Makes sense.
It can also be frustration with new rules they don't fully get yet, or feelings like jealousy, maybe boredom, or just pure sensory or emotional overload.
Right.
And it's so crucial to remember, as the source points out, these aren't usually signs of being bad. At 3, they might know the rule we don't hit, but they still lack that consistent impulse control to stop themselves every single time.
The intention isn't necessarily malicious,
Often not. It's more about underdeveloped skills.
and the document gives some practical phrases for those moments like, I won't let you hit, that hurt. Let's try using your words next time.
Yes, clear, simple, and immediate. Or suggesting an alternative. Try again with your hands by your sides and using your voice instead, redirecting them to a better way.
So how can we actively support all this development? What kinds of things should we be doing or encouraging?
Well, for language and early literacy, the source suggests books with simple plots, maybe recurring characters they like, playing simple letter or sound games, but keeping it fun, no pressure.
Okay.
Encouraging storytelling in different ways, drawing pictures, using puppets, acting things out, and rhyming books or simple joke books are great for memory and just playing with language.
And for nurturing that amazing imaginative play.
Lots of unstructured time is key. Provide props, dress-up clothes, blocks, cardboard boxes, whatever open-ended things they can turn into anything.
Let them lead.
Exactly. Let them create their own worlds. And the advice to kind of play along with their fantasy logic while maybe gently narrating what's real alongside it is really helpful.
Right, validating their imagination. Now, the document also mentions that fears often peak around this age. That definitely rings true. Suddenly scared of the dark or monsters.
Yes, and it's often tied to that cognitive growth again. They can now imagine things going wrong, negative possibilities.
But they can't fully rationalize them away yet.
Exactly. So common fears pop up. Darkness, imaginary creatures, loud, unexpected sounds, getting hurt, getting lost. The key thing is to take their fears seriously.
Don't just dismiss them.
Right. Validate the feeling, I see you're scared, but reassure them of their safety. That monster won't hurt you and I'm right here. And practical things help, like a nightlight or making up silly songs about the scary thing.
Okay. And socially, how do we help them learn those interaction skills?
Simple board games are great for practicing turns and rules. Cooperative tasks like cleaning up together. And even practicing little social scripts.
Like what?
Like, can I have a turn when you're done? Or, that made me feel sad when you took my toy. Or, I'm still playing with it, giving them the words to use.
That makes sense. The document also brings up social comparisons starting around now. They begin noticing differences.
That's right. It often starts innocently noticing hair color, height, things like that. But the source wisely notes that early seeds of bias can form here.
Not out of malice, though.
Usually not. More through just observation and maybe hearing things around them. That's why diverse books and toys are important. And modeling curiosity about differences without shame.
How would you model that?
Just simple, factual answers. Yes, her skin is darker. Everyone's body is a little different. Or, his mommy uses a wheelchair to move. What a cool way to get around. Keep it neutral and informative.
It's got it. And what about fostering life skills and responsibility?
Using helper language is great, involving them in small, actual tasks, feeding the cat, matching socks, setting napkins on the table.
Gives them a sense of contributing.
Exactly, including them in simple cooking or tidying, and teaching those first this, then that routines helps build sequencing skills too.
And finally, those crucial emotional regulation strategies, always a hot topic.
Always. Naming and validating emotions is step 1. You seem really frustrated right now. Helping them understand it's okay to feel things.
And co-regulation.
Yes, that's where the calm adult helps the child calm down through your own calm presence, maybe gentle touch, quiet voice, modeling deep breaths together. Okay. Visual routines can help prevent overwhelm too. And having calming tools available, bubbles are great. Teaching dragon breaths, offering a special comfort object, or creating a little cozy corner they can retreat to.
Lots of practical ideas there. Now, the source has this section on nuances and notable traits, which is full of interesting tidbits. One is that reminder, regression is normal, especially with stress.
So important to remember. A new sibling arrives, start preschool, big family change. You might see temporary steps back in potty training or sleep. It's usually them just adapting.
Okay, and the hypothetical thinker's idea, all those what-if questions. The document says they're not lies, right? They're like thought experiments.
Exactly. What if the moon fell down? Isn't deception. It's them exploring possibilities, testing the limits of reality in their minds.
And related to that, lying actually starts around this age sometimes.
It can, yes. And interestingly, it's often seen as a sign of developing theory of mind or perspective taking. They realize their version might be different from reality and they can try to change your perception.
So how should you react?
The suggestion is often curiosity rather than accusation. That's an interesting story. I wonder what really happened. Opening a door instead of slamming it shut.
And memory quirks. So sharp sometimes, remembering tiny details from weeks ago, but also inventive when they're unsure.
Yes, memory is fascinating at this age. It's definitely sharp, but can be spotty. And the source emphasizes how emotionally charged events stick much more strongly.
The emotional weighting of memory.
Exactly. Which links to that mental time travel idea, a negative past experience influencing future anxiety. Like, I cried at the dentist last time, so the dentist is scary.
So past experiences really shape their future expectations.
Very much so. That's why visual calendars, talking about what's coming up and trying to create positive associations, can be helpful.
The document also touches on guilt and shame starting to form and how they connect their actions to their identity. I made a mess can become I am bad.
Yes, that's a critical point. That's why the advice to separate the behavior from the child's identity is so vital.
So instead of you're being naughty, maybe.
Maybe. Hitting hurts. That wasn't a kind choice, but you are still a kind person. Let's figure out how to make it right. Focusing on the action and repair, not labeling the child.
Building a healthy self-concept.
Exactly. And it's worth noting, the source also says some kids actually become calmer at 3, more emotionally aware, better at talking things out. That's normal too. Development isn't one size fits all.
That's a good reminder. Avoid comparison.
Please.
Finally, that caregiver mindset shift section really hit home, acknowledging that huge transition from dependence to testing independence
It's a big shift for parents too.
and normalizing feeling both amazed by their growth and, frankly, overwhelmed sometimes.
Completely normal.
And I love the reframe. They're not trying to win. They're trying to understand themselves.
Yeah.
You're not losing. You're guiding.
That's such a helpful perspective, isn't it? Changes the dynamic entirely.
It really does. So just to quickly recap some of those really key takeaways from the source. Understanding regression can come before leaps. The importance of their imagination and those related fears. Becoming aware of social comparison. Understanding why tricky behaviors might pop up again.
Yeah.
Being mindful of how guilt and self-image are forming.
Right.
And that link between time, memory, and worry. So much valuable stuff in there.
Absolutely. It's just an incredibly rich, complex, and exciting stage of development.
It really is. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of the 3-year-old, here's a final thought for you to consider, kind of inspired by the source but broadened out. Think about that profound shift around age 3, moving from needing constant care to actively, sometimes clumsily, reaching for independence. What fundamental human drives do you really see emerging most strongly during this captivating time? And how do those early explorations, those first steps into their own agency, shape the people they eventually become? Thank you for joining us for this deep dive today.
Thanks for the great discussion.
We hope this exploration gave you some useful insights. We definitely encourage you to keep exploring related topics and maybe look back at your own early memories, or just watch the young children around you with these new perspectives in mind.